Hi there, and welcome to this update for Motion Symphony. It's been quite a while since I've shown anything, and that's because, well, I don't like to show unless I've got something really worth showing. And while you have seen the motion matching and you probably thought, oh, it's almost finished, it's easy to get motion matching working in a simple form. But to get this together as a product, as a plugin that's production ready, that I can happily ship without with a good conscience, there's a lot of work that has to go into it, and there's a lot of things that need to support the motion matching and improvements and optimization that needs to be done. So while in this video I might not show anything that I haven't shown before in terms of this character running around, a lot has happened. A lot of bug fixes, optimizations, extra tools, all that sort of stuff. So let's have a look. First things first, the most obvious, a whole lot of debugging stuff. Debugging, super important. If you can't see your data, then you don't know your data is good. And with motion matching and pose matching and all the other types of matching, the distance matching, there's a lot of data and you need to be able to see it. So this is all visually here. I believe I did have some sort of debugging before. What have I done? Oh, I've gone full screen. But it was dodgy, and so now everything is tied to console commands, so we can access everything from MoSynth. So every single node, distance matching, pose matching, etc. They've got all their things. We can debug the motion matching search, the motion matching trajectory, which we can see now, and the I think the pose as well, pose. So for example, we'll turn that off. There we go. So yeah, that's been improved a lot. Let me just get out of full screen. What else have I improved? Okay, so well, mirroring, runtime mirroring. So it's kind of important because if you have a whole animation set and you do this mocap take, it could be biased to one side. By doing runtime mirroring on some of your animations, you guarantee that on your left and your right side you have the same poses, and therefore the pose search is not going to be biased to any one side. It's really good for coverage. It's absolutely essential if you have I think it's actually absolutely essential. Either you have to mirror at runtime, or you have to physically mirror your animations and put them in as well. So you can actually still choose which one you want to do. Mirroring your animation is probably going to be a little bit more performant because you don't have to mirror it at runtime. But yeah, you can mirror at runtime. That's good for iteration. It's good if you're happy with the performance that it gets. So you do need a mirroring profile. Most of it will be automatically set up for you. So there's a lot here. It tells it how to mirror each bone because there's a fair bit to it when you add the skeleton. But most of it's automatic. Depending on your rig, you might have to change a couple of settings on a couple of bones. But you'll get a good example that'll come with Motion Symphony, which will be this one for the UE4 mannequin, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. In the actual motion data, so this is the editor for the motion data. It's pretty no frills at the moment, but it does its job. And that's another thing I'll be doing, is improving the look and feel and the quality of life. Adding icons. You can see I've started doing that now, which means, hey, it's getting close to being finished. Surprise. But yeah, you can choose whether you want to enable mirroring on any given animation, and then it'll pre-process the mirrored poses in addition. So you can effectively double your coverage, the animation coverage, which can be really, really good. Adds a little bit of redundancy as well. But for example, you might have asymmetrical animations, like if you're holding a rifle, it's going to be asymmetrical and you don't want to mirror it. So it's an option there if you want. So yeah, that is mirroring poses. Yeah, so blend spaces in motion matching. So this here is actually a blend space. So you can add blend spaces now. I need to separate it with some headings. It's really, this is literally the last thing I did, but you can add blend spaces in it as well. And yeah, it's not blend spaces in the traditional sense where you actually change the position on the blend spaces. Basically, I am sampling pose. So I'm pre-processing the blend space at different samples throughout the blend space. It's probably better with 1D blend spaces, otherwise you get way too many poses with the 2D blend space. So you might have your running arc left, your running forward, and your running arc right in a blend space from left to right, and it'll just pick sample points along that. If you're using mocap, probably not really necessary. If you're using cut clips, very, very, like, I'd say absolutely essential. I implemented this same thing. I call them scatter blend spaces or scatter spaces because you're taking scattered samples, and it really improves the coverage, because if you just have your arcing left and arcing and your forward, it's a big snap when you start doing turns, and it's horrible. Motion matching can only use the animations you give it. It can't usually blend between them, but this kind of gives you a way to do that. So yeah, blend spaces and motion matching. A bit more work to get the editor side, the GUI side working for it, because you can't currently change the settings on it and stuff. But all the back end, the pre-processing, all the big work is done for that now, and that required a fair bit of rewriting of things. So before I go into more features, I just want to talk about when this thing is going to be done. So I said my goal was Christmas 2020. Now 2020 was a very strange and hectic year, and so obviously I didn't reach that goal, and that's fine. I kind of expected that I wouldn't, but you set goals, aim for the moon, land among the stars, all that. But it's getting there, and right now I've got a list of things that I need to do, and I'm just going through the list until it's finished. I just will not compromise. I'm not going to release this early, no matter what, because it's going to cause me more problems. It's going to cause you problems. You're going to get upset, oh, this doesn't work, which is fair enough, and let's just not waste each other's time with that. Let's I'm sorry if it misses your project. It is what it is. And yeah, and on that note, I have had a lot of people requesting like an early access. Oh, we can help you test the thing. And while I do appreciate the sentiment, the idea of that, it's not going to happen. I'm not interested in that at all. I've done it in the past with other plugins, and the problem is it just causes more work, because while you might say you don't need support, how can you possibly use this without documentation and support? So I'd have to write documentation, otherwise it's pointless. You're not going to be able to test it or use it properly. Yeah, so I'm if you do send me that request, don't be offended if I reject you, because I will. I already have plenty of people that I know personally that will test it, will help me test it, and that will do just fine. So yeah, there is that. Okay, so what else? The optimization. Now, I did show a bit of this optimization. Now, as an algorithm that culls a lot of poses, so you might have 50,000 poses, but you're only searching 500 every frame, and you can see how I can actually set the amount that I'm allowing to search every frame. Obviously, the higher that amount is, the better quality. But generally, I found around 500, I could get pretty good quality, or very close to what it would be if you're searching everything, which I think is good enough. But I have set this optimize checkbox, so you can choose to optimize it or not, because optimizing can be very slow. There's multiple steps of clustering. There's k-means clustering on the trajectories, and then it does hierarchical clustering on the poses, which can take really long. I will probably multi-thread that and improve the speed someday, but I'm not sure if that's going to be at release, so it can take quite a while depending on the amount of animations in each anim data. So when you're iterating, you turn the optimization off, and you go for it, and then when you're happy with it, then you can optimize it and pre-process it again with optimization. All it does is it takes the poses that you pre-processes and then just churns them through this big algorithm to make a lookup table. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of new settings here. Most of this I'm going to hide. It's at least going to be an advanced tab, because you probably don't want to change this too often. You do need a calibration for the optimization, so you're kind of committing to a calibration. Which I think is okay, and I'll explain that later. But most of the stuff you're not going to play with too much. and it'll kind of be, I'll probably put a checkbox to automatically figure it out for you based on the number of poses you have, etc. But I'm going to leave these in an advanced tab so you can play around with the clustering and all that stuff. So that is that. What else can we look at? Well, I mean, there's been a lot of bug fixes. There was quite a few crashes, and they've all been fixed. I haven't crashed in a while, so that's good. That's always a good thing. A fixed root motion. I'm not sure if I showed this before, because when I showed it Motion Symphony last, there was a bit of funny sliding with the root motion. Unreal Engine's a little bit weird when it comes to root motion compared to other engines from what I've experienced, and I had to do a lot of kind of work. I wouldn't say hacking, but I had to use things very cleverly. I had to use the existing anim sequence classes and all that in a way that, and I was just able to get it right. So that's working. I think it's improved even more since 4.26, which is great. But yeah, so the root motion is working pretty well. Inertialization, I mentioned this briefly, but it's fully supported now, and I highly recommend using it because then you're only ever extracting one clip, which is great for performance. Let me actually go to the motion matching thing here. So if we go to our anim graph, you can see we've got inertialization, and then I've got the motion snapshot. Now I'm not sure if I showed this motion snapshot, but the purpose of this motion snapshot is it records the pose here. So we can actually match between states. So we're matching the actual pose rather than the pose in the data. Now traditionally with motion matching, you find the pose in the data based on the time since the pose was chosen, and that all that code is still in there. It can still do that, and if you don't have, it'll still automatically do that if you don't have this motion snapshot node. But the motion snapshot allows us to motion match and pose match between motion matching nodes, pose matching nodes, and all that stuff in different states. It can even pose match from a normal animation clip, which has nothing to do with motion matching, into any of those pose matching or motion matching nodes. So it's super important. It's super powerful. You tell it what you want it to record. If you don't tell it, then the nodes in the graph will sort of automatically register to it, though that's a little bit, you shouldn't do that because it's a bit slow. But yeah, so we can motion match between different states, and that's a big deal because we can now separate our motion data into different motion datas. Therefore, we reduce the amount of poses being searched in addition to the already good pose culling, which means we can also have fast optimizations, which means we don't even need require tags because we will set things up so that it's crouching, running, walking. Now, you might think, oh, but I really like the idea of having one node that does everything. And yes, that's a cool, novel idea, but I don't find it very practical. And this is based on experience with motion matching for Unity, where you don't have too much of a choice. And the difficulty in this is that when you're running and you do like a plant, for example, and then the motion matching chooses a walking start. When you separate it out in states, and in this anim data that you have slotted here, it only has running animations, it's never going to play that walking animation. So yeah, that's cool. The other thing that I think is, I don't think motion matching in as itself should be your whole graph. I get it. It's really cool tech and it's, I've got one node that runs the whole thing. It's really awesome. I love it. But I feel like a combination of things from like Strider, my other plugin, the pose matching, the distance matching nodes will help you get a better balance and more control of your animation system. And at the end of the day, it is going to be a state machine, but it's going to be a much, much smaller state machine than you're used to making. You'll have one node for stops, for example. Doesn't matter if it's left foot forward, right foot forward, could even have crouch stops. You just have the one node. You let the multi-pose matching node choose for you. You may even only use motion matching for once you are already up to running speed. So your run starts, your run stops could be different nodes, and then your motion matching does the snakes, and it does the arcs and the and the plants or whatever. My goal is that you can set up your animation graph any way you want, not just the one way. So there's my kind of reasoning behind that. And it also means that with that way of thinking, require tags are not a thing. I'll talk about tags in a bit. Forgive me if I'm going all over the place. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to Motion Symphony. It is a big asset. Animation modifiers. So yeah, I've done a bunch of animation modifiers. This is for distance matching to automatically create the curves. I'll probably leave these as blueprints because it's only an editor, so you don't really need ultra C++ performance. We'll see about that, but I'll probably just leave it in blueprint. And you got rotation. I'm probably going to add a bunch of different animation modifiers for other things that will be useful, but we've done those. So that's for distance matching. I'm not going to go too much into that stuff because I can't really show a good example. That's another thing that I really need to do before releasing this. I need to download a bunch of Paragon animations and test it, make sure everything works good. I've tested them in isolated cases, but my experience tells me that, you know, you test it with different models, you test it with different animations, and you find more bugs. And I want to find them and fix them before they get reported to me, because that can be frustrating. And then having to redeploy the plugin, you know, more often than I'd like to. So there's that. Tools. Okay, motion matching is great, but you need tools to help it, especially if you're using root motion. So here's one tool, the trajectory error warping actor component. Now, this isn't going to be a problem if you are not using root motion, but if you are using root motion, there can be a problem with motion matching where, you know, it picks the closest pose and the trajectory might be very close. So you can see here, it's not always picking the trajectory, like the red is not exactly on the green. So the green is the desired, the red is the animation. Now, what the trajectory error warping does is it procedurally rotates the character over time so that it will be perfectly in line. So they do go in the exact correct direction. And that's absolutely essential if you want controlled gameplay. Of course, again, if you're not using root motion, it doesn't really matter, but that is a tool that I made for motion matching for Unity. It is something that they used in For Honor to fix that same issue, and so yeah, I thought it's something that absolutely has to be there. Another thing is input profiles. So you can create this little struct input profile, and basically it's nothing crazily complicated. It is basically a remap set. So it remaps input to specific speed multipliers. So in this case, I've only got running and idle animations. So from 0 to 0.2, I'm saying there's no movement. So it remaps to 0. From 0.2 to 1, it remaps to 1. So this is with a controller. A lot of games do this. They don't give you every single speed on the rainbow. It's sort of stepped. And you can add as many different steps as you like. Maybe you have walk, jog, run, sprint, whatever. But in this case, I only have runnings at the moment, so it's set to that. And that's important because with motion matching, if you have a trajectory that's in between a walk and a run, but you only have walk and run animations, it's going to throw the cost off quite a lot. So you need to remap it, even if you plan to use Strider to get those speeds in between. And that is going to be an option. So you'll use this to remap. And if you want to get speeds in between, you're going to have to use my other plugin, Strider, to warp the stride and modify the speed from there. So that is another feature. Obviously, I've created functions to do that for you. This is... So, for example, a blueprint function library, so we can make the camera relative, input relative to the camera, which is good for our trajectory. We can apply our trajectory error warping. There's all these functions. And we can also plug in, where is it? Input profile, there we go. You can set up the input profile and it automatically shapes your input for you. So a lot of utility tools to go along with it. Okay. My voice is getting dry. So what else do we have? I've shown the pose matching, distance matching stuff before. I'm not going to show it this time because I don't have a good test case set up. But I will do that with the Paragon assets. It's the best test case because, hey, that the whole concept of distance matching came from Paragon, so it'll be a good test case and probably be good examples of that. Yeah, so is there anything else that I have missed? Yes, okay, modularization. I haven't talked about that. So if we look at our anim data, you can see I've got this set up trajectory times and pose config, which has all the joints. And you pick them up here. You click this, pick bones, and you can choose your bones. Probably make this a tree view instead of a list. But anyway, that's just quality of life stuff, and that I've got a lot of that to do. But the thing is, if you're going to be separating your anim data, so this asset, this motion anim data, into different states, you're going to be making separate ones, and you're going to probably be wanting the same configuration. You don't have to, but you probably do want to keep it the same. And so to save people from having to redo this every time, and the mistakes of it being not the same, I've made this these modules. So this module is the trajectory times and the pose joints. I'm making another module for the calibration, so we can always ensure we're using the same calibration or just reusing it instead of writing it out for every single node or every single optimization part of the preprocessor. Like, I don't want this to be hard coded in. I want to just place the asset in here. You can reuse the same one every time for consistency's sake. So yeah, modularity, it's something that I didn't do initially with motion matching for Unity, and then by popular demand I did it, and it helps a lot because everything can be a lot more modular, and reusing of data instead of recreating it all the time. So that's that. Blend spaces, we've been over that. Just generally improving the quality. Oh, tags. Yeah, one last thing is tags. So I was previously going to have a window here, and I might still someday after release, but I've taken it away for now, and this window was going to be like a tagging timeline, kind of like the notify timeline for an animation sequence. And you'd click on your different animations and you'd add tags and all that stuff, and that's kind of how it works in motion matching for Unity. However, after thinking about it for a long time, I made the design decision not to have it in here, because I want again, this is going back to modularization, I want the tags to be sitting with the animation. So if I put that animation in a different motion data, so say this one, I want to put it in here, I don't have to re-tag everything again. So for now, at least to begin with, tags are going to take the form of notify states. They're going to be set up in a special way so they don't trigger at runtime and cause extra issues. So don't worry about that. So you'll go to your actual animations. Where's my animation? So for example, this one. And you'll actually, add them in here. I've already done it. So I've got do not use tags, which basically means don't use a certain part of the animation. And when it pre-processes, it flags those poses to never pick them in the motion matching search. Another thing is that a tag that I am going to add is pose favor. So if we have a look at our this here, for example, I click on this animation and I've got this favor option. I'm going to change this name to cost multiplier because it makes more sense. But basically it's at 1, which is default. So when any pose in this animation its cost is calculated, that cost is going to be multiplied by 1. If I set it to 1.5, its cost is going to become higher because it's multiplied by 1.5, or the opposite with 0.5, whatever its cost is times 0.5. That's going to be the cost. So I can make it more likely for this particular animation to be chosen if I decrease this number, or less likely if I increase it. And this can be extremely powerful and useful for getting the results that you want. However, it needs to be on a pose basis. So I want to be able to tag specific parts of the animation and not necessarily the whole thing. Maybe there's a stop or a start at section of a long mocap take that I don't like, or that I want to play less often. I can tag it differently. You generally want to tag your straight running animations with favor so that they are chosen more often and they stay more consistent, all that kind of stuff. So do not use and favor tags is probably Pose favor tags is probably the kinds of tags that I'm going to use, that I'm going to add at release. I've decided against require tags. Now, what are require tags? It's a tag where you tell the system, you literally call a function that says, hey, only choose animations with the tag crouch or the tag gun equipped, or both those tags together. And the reason why I don't want to do this is because the way UE4 is set up its animation graph, it's extremely flexible. I can put motion matching nodes straight into the animation graph, into each state. I couldn't do that with Unity, and that required that require tag system is effectively state by tags. And it's not really necessary because, you know, we can just separate the crouch into a different state. And this is a good idea because it's going to be more performant anyway, on top of the pose culling, because it's just less poses to search. It's going to improve your optimization times on your anim datas. We can make things more modular. It's easier to control. It's just a more viable thing. So yes, you are going to have a state machine, but it's going to be vastly simpler than it ever used to be. And in addition to it being way more advanced. So simpler looking, simpler setup, way more advanced, high quality animation, provided you have the animation source assets that are high quality as well. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, not going to have tags in there. It's just going to be on the animation themselves. Then you don't have to redo them every time. Now, the other reason why I'm against require tags for this is in motion matching for Unity, I don't have this optimization. Now, this optimization puts poses into lookup tables. Now, it makes it very difficult when you introduce tags, because what if there's no animation in the tag in that lookup table that has that tag? Then you have to look at all the animations, and then you lose your performance benefit. You might have to look through, 50,000, 100,000 poses. You're going to get lag spikes. Maybe it's not too bad, but I'm going to give this a go without require tags first, release without. And if it becomes a thing that just has to be there, then I'll add them later. Because, yes, I prefer this visual approach to setting it up rather than what tags are currently active. Anyway, that's my thinking at the moment. So what do I have to do still? A lot of quality of life things. I need to also change the calibration. So for example, where is it? I've lost it again. So the calibration, it needs to be more granular. I've already added in the list for pose joints. So I want to be able to change the weight multipliers for each joint as well. There's a whole bunch of other quality of life stuff. There's documentation, video tutorials, which are probably more important than anything else. And yeah, one of the major things that I did do that you won't notice at all, unless you had bought the asset, and you'd be very disappointed, is I had to do a lot of work to get it to package properly. It might surprise you that Motion Symphony was the first plugin I ever did in UE4. I actually started learning UE4 when I made it, so I had all the motion matching knowledge, but not the UE4 knowledge. So I had to redo a whole lot of things, and I did Strider since I started that. I sort of took a break and did Strider in between, and that taught me a lot about it. And now I'm kind of up to speed with everything. So I had a lot of work to make things packageable, to make it something that's going to work really well in any system. So yeah, that's all done now. So big block is out of the way. I'm rambling on, but thanks for listening. I will see you whenever, next time maybe. Thanks for watching.